100 million years ago, the ground beneath the state of Kansas was the bottom of a sea. Not a lake, not a river. A warm inland ocean, hundreds of feet deep in places, stretching in shifting shapes from the Gulf of Mexico toward the Arctic, filled with creatures so large, so strange, and so completely unlike anything alive today that when 19th century collectors pulled their bones out of chalk cliffs and prairie soil, some people could hardly believe they belonged to real animals. This is that ocean. And tonight, we are going in. Hey, welcome. Glad you're here. If you've never thought much about prehistoric oceans before, I completely understand. Dinosaurs get the posters. They get the films. They get the museum lobby skeletons. They get the dramatic footprints and the tiny plastic toys that somehow always end up under a couch. The ocean that existed alongside them? Almost nobody talks about it. Which is genuinely a shame, because what lived in that water makes a T-Rex look, with all respect to the king, like a very serious problem on land only. In the next hour and a half, we are going to move through the Cretaceous Sea, layer by layer, from the bright surface where flying reptiles skimmed for fish, down into the blue open water, through swarms of ammonites and silver predators, past sharks, turtles, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs, and finally into the quiet mud where the whole world wrote itself into chalk. You are going to hear about animals that were misidentified for decades, predators that died from eating too ambitiously, birds with teeth, sharks with crushing pavement for jaws, and an extinction so sudden that, in many places, the fossil record seems to blink. By the end of this, you may never look at the ocean the same way again. Or at Kansas. Kansas has been keeping secrets. Here is what the planet looked like in the Cretaceous. For much of this world, there were no permanent polar ice sheets like the ones we know today. Sea levels were far higher than modern coastlines. The continents were arranged differently. The Atlantic was still opening. The Rockies had not yet become the mountains we know, but the forces that would raise them were already bending the crust of North America. And down the middle of the continent, water moved in. The Western Interior Seaway was not one simple bathtub. It expanded, shrank, deepened, shallowed, and changed shape over millions of years. At times, it split North America into two long island continents, Laramidia to the west, Appalachia to the east. Where wheat fields, highways, ranches, and small towns stand today, there were waves. Imagine standing in western Kansas 85 million years ago. No barns, no roads, no dry horizon, just warm water moving over a broad shelf. The smell of salt, the flash of fish below, and far above you, a pteranodon circling like a paper airplane designed by a committee of dragons. The strange thing is not that the ocean was there. The strange thing is that it was normal. For tens of millions of years, this was a functioning marine world. It had seasons, migrations, nurseries, food chains, disasters, recoveries, quiet afternoons, and very bad days to be a small fish. Before we meet the giants, It helps to understand one simple fact. This ocean was not ruled by dinosaurs. That title is a little bit of a cheat, and I admit it. Dinosaurs ruled the land. Birds, which are living dinosaurs, were beginning to rule the air. But the sea belonged to other reptiles, animals from different branches of the evolutionary tree. Mosasaurs were not dinosaurs. Plesiosaurs were not dinosaurs either, though everyone at a gift shop has quietly agreed to let that one slide. The ocean had its own royalty. And the crown, by the late Cretaceous, belonged to the mosasaurs. The largest mosasaurs were bus-length marine lizards. Not whales, not crocodiles, lizards. Their closest living relatives are snakes and monitor lizards, which means the Cretaceous ocean eventually placed the food chain in the hands, or rather the flippers, of something distantly related to a Komodo dragon that had fully committed to swimming. That is a sentence nature wrote. Not me. Mosasaurs began as smaller coastal reptiles, probably descended from land-dwelling or semi-aquatic lizards. Over time, their limbs became paddles. Their tails became powerful engines. Their bodies stretched into long, streamlined shapes. Some had narrow jaws for catching fish. Others had heavier skulls for attacking larger prey. The family became a whole dynasty of predators. And they did not simply visit the sea. They became the sea. For a long time, paleontologists wondered whether mosasaurs had to crawl onto shore to lay eggs, like sea turtles do today. The idea made sense. They were reptiles. Reptiles lay eggs. Case closed. Please pass the field notebook. But fossils have a habit of reopening cases. Tiny mosasaur specimens, newborn-sized animals from open marine deposits, showed that even the youngest members of this group lived far from shore. The simplest explanation is that mosasaurs gave birth at sea. Their young entered the world surrounded by water, with no beach, no nest, no gentle nursery, and absolutely no beginner difficulty setting. Imagine being born into the Western Interior Seaway. You were small. You were soft compared with the adults. Your first view of existence is not a parent holding you, not grass, not sunlight through leaves, but a green-blue world full of teeth. Above, shadows pass. Below, larger shadows wait. Around you are fish with fangs, sharks with slicing teeth, turtles with hooked beaks, and other mosasaurs that may or may not consider family loyalty a serious ethical commitment. And yet, some of those newborns survived. They learned the currents. They found food. They avoided becoming food. They grew from fragile young animals into hunters that could take fish, birds, turtles, plesiosaurs, sharks, and sometimes one another. In the end, they became the dominant marine reptiles of the last great age of the dinosaurs. A mosasaur's skull was built for a particular kind of violence. Its jaws could open wide, and many mosasaurs had extra teeth on the roof of the mouth, pterygoid teeth, which helped pull slippery prey backward. If a fish tried to escape, every movement could simply push it deeper into the mouth. This is a useful system if your dinner is shaped like a wet bar of soap and has no interest in cooperation. Some mosasaurs probably used ambush tactics. Others may have cruised actively through open water. Tylosaurus, one of the great predators of the western interior seaway, had a long, toothless snout at the front of its skull, almost like a battering ram. Paleontologists have found evidence of Tylosaurus eating fish, sharks, birds, and other marine reptiles. One famous Tylosaurus specimen contained the remains of a smaller plesiosaur inside it. This is the kind of fossil that does not whisper. It clears its throat and says, yes, the ocean was exactly as stressful as you suspected. But mosasaurs were not alone at the top. The Cretaceous Sea was not a simple pyramid with one monster at the peak. It was more like a crowded dinner party, where every guest had teeth, armor, venomous-looking fins, or a deeply suspicious jaw. And beneath the giants, the entire ecosystem depended on something nearly invisible: plankton. The most powerful animals in the seaway could not exist without organisms small enough to drift in the water by the billions. Coccolithophores, tiny algae covered in microscopic plates of calcium carbonate, bloomed in the sunlit upper waters. When they died, their little plates sank like mineral snow. Over unimaginable spans of time, that snow became chalk. The chalk cliffs and chalk beds of the Cretaceous are made in part from the remains of tiny plankton. The word Cretaceous itself comes from the Latin for chalk. So the age of mosasaurs and giant fish is also the age of drifting specks that slowly turned sunlight into stone. There is something beautifully unfair about that. A mosasaur could dominate the ocean for decades. A plankton bloom could help build the landscape for millions of years. History often belongs to whoever leaves the most paperwork. And plankton were extremely good at filing. In the western interior seaway, the water column was layered. Near the surface, sunlight powered life. Small fish hunted smaller animals. Squid-like creatures moved through the water. Ammonites floated and darted in coiled shells. Larger fish patrolled below them. Sharks and reptiles moved through the system like sudden weather. At the bottom, conditions could be very different. In some times and places, the deeper water held little oxygen. When oxygen is low, scavengers and burrowing animals become rare. A dead animal sinking into that quiet mud might be covered before it was destroyed. This is one reason the seaway preserved such astonishing fossils. Not every skeleton became a fossil, of course. Most bodies disappeared. They were eaten, scattered, dissolved, broken by waves, or lost in sediment that would later erode away. Fossilization is not the normal ending. It is the exception. A lucky accident. A geological paperwork error. But in Kansas, especially in the Niobrara chalk, the accidents were spectacular. The rock preserved fish with stomach contents, birds with teeth, marine reptiles, turtles, pterosaurs, shark teeth, ammonites, shells, and bones broken by bites. It preserved not just animals, but moments. A meal, an injury, a chase, a body sinking into silence. One of the most famous of those moments is the fish within a fish. Xiphactinus was a large predatory fish, sometimes compared to a tarpon after a very bad evolutionary mood swing. It could grow more than 15 feet long. It had a deep body, powerful jaws, and teeth that made it look as if it had been designed specifically to ruin the day of anything smaller than itself. In 1952, George Sternberg discovered a fossil Xiphactinus in Kansas with another fish, Gillicus, preserved inside its body. The smaller fish was about 6 feet long. The larger fish had apparently swallowed it whole, or nearly whole, and died before digestion could do its work. There are several possible reasons. The prey may have ruptured an organ. It may have been too large. The predator may have made a bold decision and then had a very brief period to reconsider it. It is one of the great fossil reminders that confidence and wisdom are not the same thing. Xiphactinus was not a gentle background animal. It was a fast, open water predator, likely hunting by sudden acceleration. Its jaws were not neat tools. They were traps lined with sharp teeth. And yet, it was still prey for larger animals. Sharks fed on it. Mosasaurs could take it. In this ocean, even a monster fish was also a menu item. That is one of the themes of the Cretaceous Sea. Almost nothing was safe. Size helped, but it did not guarantee peace. Armor helped, but it did not guarantee survival. Speed helped, but something else might be faster. Teeth helped, unless the other animal had more teeth, better teeth, or simply arrived from below. Another fish, Encotus, is often nicknamed the saber-toothed herring, which is a wonderful phrase because it sounds like a joke a museum invented for children. But Encotus was real. It was a predatory fish with long fangs, giving its skull an almost deep-sea appearance. It was not actually a herring in the modern sense, but the nickname stuck because paleontology, like every field, occasionally enjoys a dramatic label. Encotus was common, successful, and widespread. It was the kind of animal that helps you remember ecosystems are not built only from giants. Medium-sized predators matter enormously. They connect the tiny world of plankton and small fish to the larger world of sharks and marine reptiles. If you were a small fish in the western interior seaway, your problems did not begin with a mosasaur. They began with something closer to your own size, which is somehow worse. It means danger was not a distant shadow. It was your neighbor. Then there were the sharks. Cretaceous sharks were not background extras. They were major players. Some were fast-cutting predators. Some were scavengers. Some specialized in crushing hard shells. Some left bite marks on bones large enough to show they fed on, or at least investigated, the bodies of marine reptiles. Cretaceous is one of the most famous. It is sometimes called the Ginsu shark, after the kitchen knives, because its teeth were built for slicing. It could reach lengths comparable to a large modern great white, though it was not the same animal. It hunted in the western interior seaway, when mosasaurs were rising to power. Cretaceous ate large fish. It scavenged and probably hunted marine reptiles. Fossils show shark bite marks on mosasaur and plesiosaur bones. Some marks healed, meaning the victim survived the attack. Others did not heal, which is a very calm, scientific way of saying the story ended there. The relationship between sharks and mosasaurs was not a simple rivalry. They occupied overlapping roles. Sometimes sharks ate what mosasaurs left behind. Sometimes they may have attacked injured reptiles. Sometimes the reptiles ate sharks. The ocean did not care about brand identity. It cared about opportunity. Squalocorax, another shark, had serrated teeth and was likely a very effective scavenger as well as a predator. Its teeth are found in many late Cretaceous deposits. If a carcass sank, animals like Squalocorax may have arrived quickly, taking advantage before the body disappeared into mud. Then there was Ticketus, one of the strangest sharks in the seaway. Ticketus did not specialize in slicing through large prey. It had broad, flattened teeth arranged in crushing plates. Imagine a shark that looked at the ocean's hard-shelled buffet and said, "Yes, I would like the crunchy option." It likely fed on shelled animals, clams, ammonites, and other tough prey. Some species may have been enormous. Instead of the elegant terror of a great white, Picetus was a shell-crushing machine. Less cinematic, perhaps, but deeply effective. Not every nightmare has to move quickly. Some nightmares chew thoughtfully. Ammonites were shelled cephalopods, relatives of squid, octopuses, and nautiluses. Many had coiled shells, chambered inside, which helped control buoyancy. Some were small enough to hold in your hand. Others grew impressively large. Their shells could be ribbed, spined, smooth, ornate, or oddly shaped, as if evolution had been experimenting with decorative architecture. They were not passive ornaments. They had eyes, arms, beaks, and the ability to move through the water. They were predators and prey. Small ammonites likely fed on tiny animals. Larger ones may have taken more substantial food. And many, many animals fed on them. A mosasaur tooth mark on an ammonite shell tells a story in one curved scar. A predator attacked. The shell resisted. Maybe the ammonite escaped. Maybe it did not. Fossils sometimes preserve failed hunts, which is comforting in a small way. Even apex predators had off days. The ammonites were also timekeepers. Because many species evolved quickly and spread widely, their fossils help geologists date rock layers. They are not just beautiful. They are clocks made of shell. In the Cretaceous, they flourished. Then, at the end, most of them vanished. We will come back to that. For now, stay in the warm water. Above the waves, the air is not empty. A long-winged animal glides low over the surface. Its wings are not feathered. They are membranes stretched along an elongated finger. Its skull is long, its body light, its bones air-filled. This is Pteranodon, one of the great flying reptiles of the western interior seaway. Pteranodon was not a dinosaur. It was a pterosaur. It had a wingspan that could exceed 20 feet, though its body was relatively small. It probably soared over the sea, using wind and air currents, searching for fish near the surface. Imagine a modern seabird crossed with a hang glider and a reptile. Then remove the comfort of familiarity. Pteranodon fossils are common enough in the chalk that we know these animals were important parts of the seaway world. They nested somewhere on land, perhaps on islands or coastlines, but much of their feeding life played out above open water. A pteranodon, diving or skimming for fish, was not above danger. Sharks could attack from below. Large predatory fish may have taken animals at the surface. There is even fossil evidence suggesting a shark bit a pteranodon. The sky touched the sea, and the sea sometimes bit back. Alongside pterosaurs were birds. Not modern gulls, not ducks, not penguins, but early birds, still carrying features that now feel almost mythical. Hesperornis was a flightless diving bird of the late Cretaceous. It had powerful hind limbs for swimming, tiny, useless wings, and teeth in its jaws. It lived like a loon or a cormorant in some ways, pursuing fish underwater. But if a modern bird is a polite sentence, Hesperornis was an earlier draft with sharper punctuation. It could swim well, but it could not fly. On land, it was probably awkward. In the water, it was at home. Its body tells us that birds were already experimenting with marine lifestyles, while non-avian dinosaurs still walked the continents. Think about that. In the same world as Triceratops and Tyrannosaurs, there were toothed birds diving through an inland sea in Kansas. History is rarely tidy. Another bird, Ichthyornis, was more tern-like. It could fly and had teeth. It likely caught fish near the surface. For scientists in the 19th century, toothed birds were astonishing because they helped reveal the evolutionary link between birds and reptiles. They were not just strange fossils, they were evidence in one of biology's great arguments. So the Cretaceous Seaway was not merely a monster aquarium. It was a place where major evolutionary stories overlapped. Reptiles returning to the sea, birds becoming seabirds, fish diversifying, sharks experimenting with feeding styles, plankton changing rocks, and continents rearranging the map. And then there were the plesiosaurs. If mosasaurs are the sea dragons of the late Cretaceous, plesiosaurs are the animals that look almost too strange to be functional. Some had small heads, enormous bodies, and necks so long that early scientists literally put the skull on the wrong end of one skeleton. This is understandable in the sense that the animal does look like a committee assembled it without a final meeting. Plesiosaurs were an older marine reptile lineage than mosasaurs. They had been around since the Mesozoic seas, before mosasaurs became dominant. By the late Cretaceous, several kinds lived in the western interior seaway. Long-necked elasmosaurids had astonishing necks made of many vertebrae. Their heads were small, their teeth suited for catching fish and squid-like prey. For years, people imagined them raising their necks high out of the water like swans. But their anatomy probably did not allow dramatic swan poses. The long neck was more likely used underwater. It may have helped them approach prey without bringing the bulky body too close. A school of fish might react to a large shadow, but a smaller head on a long neck could strike from a distance. The animal was not a serpent-necked swan. It was a slow, quiet ambush system with flippers. Short-necked plesiosaurs, such as polycotylids, were built differently. They had larger heads, shorter necks, and more streamlined bodies. They likely swam faster and pursued prey more actively. Some looked superficially like pliosaurs, though they were not the same group. One of the most remarkable plesiosaur fossils ever found preserved an adult polycotylus with a fetus inside. This showed that at least some plesiosaurs gave birth to live young. The baby was large relative to the mother, suggesting a reproductive strategy very different from producing many tiny offspring. That raises a fascinating possibility. Did some plesiosaurs care for their young? We do not know. Fossils cannot easily show behavior like affection, teaching, or protection. But a single large baby hints at investment. It hints, cautiously, at a marine reptile life that may have been more socially complex than old pictures of cold, solitary monsters. The Cretaceous ocean may have had mothers. Not gentle in a sentimental cartoon way. Nature is rarely that tidy. But perhaps a plesiosaur calf swam close to an adult. Perhaps it learned where to feed. Perhaps it survived because, for a while, something larger stayed near. It is easy to reduce prehistoric animals to teeth. Teeth fossilize well, and teeth are dramatic. But these were living animals. They grew. They healed. They reproduced. They made choices. They failed. They succeeded. They were not movie monsters waiting for a camera. They were neighbors in an ancient ecosystem. Even the most frightening mosasaur was once small. Even the largest shark began vulnerable. Even the weirdest long-necked plesiosaur had to solve the daily problem of breakfast. And breakfast, in the western interior seaway, might be almost anything. The seafloor had its own communities. Giant clams, called inoceramids, lived in the seaway, some growing to impressive sizes. Their shells could form beds in the chalk. Rudists, strange reef-building bivalves in some Cretaceous seas, dominated many tropical settings elsewhere. The hard-shelled world of the Cretaceous was rich enough to support animals specialized for crushing. Crinoids, relatives of sea stars and sea urchins, waved feathery arms in the water where conditions allowed. Worms burrowed. Small crustaceans moved through sediment. Snails grazed. The bottom was not always dramatic, but ecosystems are built from undramatic labor. A calm seafloor can be as important as a chase scene. Above it drifted marine snow, dead plankton, fecal pellets, tiny shells, scraps of bodies. This constant rain fed bottom life when oxygen allowed. When oxygen vanished, decay slowed, scavengers retreated, and preservation improved. The seaway sometimes became stratified, meaning layers of water did not mix well. Warm surface water could sit above deeper water. If the deeper layer lost oxygen, it became hostile to many animals. These anoxic conditions were part of broader Cretaceous ocean events, moments when large portions of the world's oceans struggled to breathe. To us, a low-oxygen seafloor is a quiet scientific phrase. To an animal living there, it meant the room was slowly running out of air. Oceanic Anoxic Event 2, near the boundary between the Cenomanian and Turonian ages, was one of the major environmental crises of the Cretaceous. Around the world, organic-rich black shales formed as oxygen-poor waters preserved carbon-rich material. The Western Interior Seaway recorded parts of this story. Life did not stop, but it changed. Communities shifted. Some animals declined. Others expanded. The Seaway was not a static paradise of monsters. It was sensitive, unstable, and connected to climate, sea level, volcanism, and the chemistry of the global ocean. In other words, the Cretaceous Sea had politics. Not elections, thankfully, just chemistry, deciding who got to survive. Sea level itself was one of the great forces shaping this world. When seas rose, marine waters spread over low continents. Coastlines moved inland. New shallow habitats appeared. Inland waterways connected. Animals dispersed. When seas fell, habitats shrank. Connections broke. Shorelines migrated, and entire ecosystems had to reorganize. The Western Interior Seaway opened and closed in pulses. It was not a permanent line drawn on a map. It was a breathing thing, expanding and retreating over geological time. For animals, this mattered. A coastline is not just scenery. It is a nursery, a feeding ground, a boundary, a refuge. If the coast moves hundreds of miles over millions of years, the rules of life move with it. Rivers carried sediment, nutrients, wood, and sometimes the bodies of land animals into the sea. This is why dinosaur remains occasionally appear in marine deposits. A dinosaur might die on land, be washed into a river, float out into the seaway, and sink among fish and sharks. So, yes, in a very literal way, sometimes dinosaurs entered the ocean. Usually not in a heroic swimming sense, more in a deeply unfortunate drifting sense. The seaway connected different worlds. From the west came sediment eroded from rising highlands. From the south came warm waters linked to the Gulf and Tethyan realm. From the north came cooler influences. The result was a vast inland marine corridor with changing salinity, temperature, and life. This mixing helped create diversity. It also created tension. Species that liked one set of conditions might struggle when water shifted. Predators followed prey. Prey followed plankton. Plankton followed nutrients and light. Everything was connected by appetite. And appetite is the hidden engine of this story. A mosasaur eating a fish is really sunlight moving upward through the food web. Plankton captured energy from the sun. Tiny animals ate plankton. Small fish ate them. Larger fish ate smaller fish. A mosasaur ate the larger fish. Then, when the mosasaur died, sharks, scavengers, bacteria, and sediment took their turn. Nothing in the ocean was outside the cycle. Even the apex predator eventually became a resource. Imagine a dead mosasaur sinking. At first, it floats, bloated by gases, while scavengers tear at it near the surface. Sharks arrive. Fish take scraps. Birds and pterosaurs may investigate if parts rise close enough. Eventually, the carcass loses buoyancy and descends. In deeper water, the body lands softly in chalky mud. If oxygen is low, the usual cleanup crew is reduced. The skeleton may remain partly articulated. Sediment covers it. Mineral-rich water seeps through. Bone changes slowly into fossil. Millions of years later, a person walking through Kansas finds a vertebra weathering out of a hillside. The ocean has become prairie. The predator has become evidence. The evidence has become a story. That transformation is almost too large to hold in the mind. A living animal moves through warm water. Then it is buried. Then continents shift. Seas drain. Sediments harden. Grass evolves. Mammals diversify. Humans arrive. Someone builds a fence. Someone else notices a bone. Deep time is not just a long time. It is the conversion of worlds into other worlds. This is why the Western Interior Seaway feels so haunting. It is not hidden at the bottom of the modern ocean. It is under roads and farms. It is in chalk bluffs and museum drawers. It is an ocean you can stand on. And if you know what to look for, the land begins to look borrowed. The famous chalk formations of Kansas, including Monument Rocks, are remains of that marine world. They rise from the plains like pale ruins, but they were not built by people. They were built by time, plankton, chemistry, and compression. A chalk tower is a cemetery of microscopic life. A mosasaur skeleton in a museum is a survivor of erosion. A shark tooth in a drawer is the last hard syllable of a vanished animal. Paleontology often begins with fragments: a tooth, a vertebra, a rib, a shell. The challenge is to turn fragments into a life without pretending we know more than we do. This is important because the Cretaceous Sea invites exaggeration. Everything seems cinematic. Huge reptiles, toothed birds, monster fish, inland oceans. It would be easy to turn it into fantasy. But the real facts are better. The real ocean had babies born far from shore. It had predators with healed bite marks. It had a fish that may have died from swallowing another fish too large. It had birds with teeth diving under pterosaurs. It had sharks that crushed shells. Instead of chasing seals that did not exist yet. Let us spend a moment with the mosasaur body, because it shows evolution at work with unusual clarity. Early mosasaurs had more lizard-like proportions. Later forms became increasingly aquatic. Their limbs were flattened into paddles. Their tails developed into more powerful swimming structures. And some evidence suggests a hypocercal tail, with a lower lobe emphasized in a way that changed how scientists imagined their swimming. Older illustrations often showed mosasaurs as sluggish sea serpents, dragging long tails behind them. Modern reconstructions tend to show more muscular, streamlined animals, with crescent-like tails in some species, capable swimmers, rather than lazy floating crocodile lizards. This matters because posture changes behavior. A slow animal and a fast animal live in different worlds. If mosasaurs were more active swimmers than once thought, their role in the ecosystem becomes even more impressive. They were not just big, they were adapted.
Their senses likely mattered too. Large eyes helped in the water. Smell may have been important. Pressure changes, movement, and vibration could signal prey.
A marine predator does not need to see everything clearly if the water itself carries information. For a fish, the first warning may not have been a visible shape, but a pressure wave. Then, jaws. Some mosasaurs had blunt teeth for crushing hard prey. Globidens, for example, had rounded teeth suited to breaking shells. Others had sharp conical teeth for gripping slippery animals. This variety tells us mosasaurs were not one lifestyle repeated at different sizes. They divided the ocean into niches. A reef or shell bed was not the same hunting ground as open water. A small fish school was not the same challenge as a turtle. Evolution produced different tools for different meals. That is the secret behind many successful groups. They do not merely become bigger. They become various. The Western Interior Seaway also had sea turtles. Some were large, fully marine animals. The giant protostegid turtles included forms like Archelon in related late Cretaceous seas, among the largest turtles known. They had broad bodies, powerful flippers, and likely spent much of their lives in open water. A huge sea turtle seems peaceful, because modern turtles have excellent public relations. But in the Cretaceous, a turtle was not simply a floating salad enthusiast. Many fed on a range of marine life, and their beaks could be formidable.
Still, armor has limits. Mosasaurs could attack turtles. Sharks could scavenge them. Eggs, if laid on beaches, would have been vulnerable to land predators.
Even a large turtle lived between worlds. Sea for feeding, land for nesting. Danger in both. The shoreline itself was a busy boundary. On low coastal plains, dinosaurs moved through forests, wetlands, and river systems. Crocodile relatives lurked in freshwater and brackish environments. Insects hummed. Flowering plants were diversifying. Early mammals stayed mostly small, though not insignificant. Ferns, conifers, and angiosperms shaped habitats. From the shore, the seaway would have looked endless. But it was not separate from land. Storms washed debris into it. Rivers delivered nutrients. Carcasses floated out. Pterosaurs flew between coast and sea. Turtles came ashore. The ocean and land exchanged matter constantly.
A dinosaur drinking at a river might never see a mosasaur, but the river could carry traces of that dinosaur to a world ruled by mosasaurs. This is one reason the phrase, "when dinosaurs ruled the ocean," works emotionally,
even if it is technically slippery. The dinosaur age was not just a land story, it was a planetary story. The same greenhouse climate, high seas, and shifting continents shaped both tyrannosaurs and mosasaurs, both flowering plants and plankton blooms. The age of dinosaurs had an oceanic half, and that half was extraordinary. Now, let us drift into a quieter part of the night and imagine a single day in the western interior seaway. Morning arrives not with birdsong from trees, but with light spreading through water. Near the surface, plankton begin their invisible labor. Small fish rise into feeding zones. Ammonites adjust buoyancy in their chambered shells. A school of Gillicus turns in silver coordination, each animal following pressure, light, and the movement of neighbors. Above them, a pteranodon glides. It barely flaps. Its wings hold the air with elegant economy. The animal tilts, adjusts, watches. Below, fish disturb the surface. For a moment, the sea seems calm. Then, something erupts upward. A predatory fish hits the school from beneath. The formation breaks. Individuals scatter. The pteranodon veers. Smaller fish flee into deeper water, where safety is an opinion rather than a fact. Farther down, a plesiosaur moves with slow strokes of 4 flippers. Its long neck does not wave wildly. It extends, bends, searches. The head is small, the teeth sharp. It is not built for crushing. It is built for seizing. A squid-like animal pulses away. A fish turns too late. In the distance, a mosasaur cruises with the calm confidence of an animal large enough to make other animals edit their plans. The mosasaur is not hungry in a human sense. It does not have malice. It does not perform villainy. It is a body-solving energy. It needs food, and the ocean provides food that would rather continue being alive. That is the entire drama of nature. By afternoon, heat gathers. The surface is bright. In shallow zones, shellfish filter water. Juvenile fish hide among structures and shadows. A turtle rises for air. It breaks the surface, breathes, and sinks again. A shadow passes overhead. Not a cloud. A pterosaur.
In deeper water, oxygen is lower. The bottom is quieter. A dead fish drifts down, turning slowly. Before it reaches the mud, scavengers find it. Nothing falls alone for long. Evening comes. Light thins. Many animals shift position in the water column. Some rise to feed under dimmer conditions. Predators use the changing light. The surface cools. The seaway darkens. Night in the Cretaceous ocean is not silent. Sound travels far in water. Bodies move. Jaws close. Shells crack. Currents drag sediment. Somewhere, a large animal surfaces to breathe, because marine reptiles, unlike fish, must return to air.
That detail is easy to forget. Mosasaurs were ocean rulers, but they were still air breathers. Every dive had a limit. Every hunt carried the need to surface. The greatest predator in the seaway remained tied to the sky by its lungs. There is poetry in that. A creature completely at home in the sea, yet never free from the atmosphere. Whales live with the same bargain today. So do sea turtles. So did ichthyosaurs before mosasaurs. Evolution can return bodies to the ocean, but it does not always erase their history. A mosasaur's ancestors breathed air on land. The mosasaur breathed air over an inland sea. Its body remembered land, even after its life belonged to water. This is one of the great patterns of marine reptile evolution. The sea is an opportunity so rich that different land animals entered it again and again. Ichthyosaurs became fish-shaped. Plesiosaurs became four-flippered cruisers. Mosasaurs became lizard-like marine predators. Turtles became ocean navigators. The ocean kept inviting vertebrates back. The invitation was generous, but the conditions were strict. To live fully at sea, an animal must swim efficiently, find food in 3 dimensions, manage salt, reproduce successfully, avoid predators when young, breathe air if it has lungs, and navigate an environment where visibility, pressure, and temperature change constantly. It is not enough to be big. It is not enough to be fierce. The ocean punishes poor design. That is why the success of mosasaurs is so striking. They were late arrivals compared with other marine reptiles, yet in the final chapters of the Cretaceous, they diversified rapidly and became dominant predators in seas around the world. Their rise was part of a larger turnover. Ichthyosaurs, once major marine reptiles, had disappeared before the end of the Cretaceous. Pliosaurs declined. Mosasaurs expanded into roles that had once belonged to others. Ecosystems are not fixed kingdoms. They are revolving doors with teeth.
And then, just as mosasaurs reached their peak, the world changed again. But before the ending, we need to appreciate the middle, the long, ordinary success of this ocean. For millions of years, generations of animals lived and died in the seaway without knowing they were part of a famous period. No creature thought, I am living in the late Cretaceous. No ammonite worried about its value as an index fossil. No mosasaur considered whether its skeleton would one day be mounted dramatically in a museum. They simply lived. When dinosaurs ruled the ocean, we see beginnings and endings because the rock record gives us pages. But most life happens between the dramatic headings.
A female mosasaur gives birth. A juvenile shark learns where fish gather. A Hesperornis dives and misses. A turtle survives an attack, carrying scars. An ammonite repairs shell damage. A fish grows larger by not being eaten today. Day after day, season after season, for longer than humans can comfortably imagine.
The seaway's animals were not waiting for extinction. They were not doomed in their own experience. They inhabited a world that worked. That makes the ending more powerful.
Around 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact blasted material into the atmosphere, ignited fires, triggered tsunamis, shook the planet, and darkened the sky. The exact chain of consequences is complex, but the broad result is clear. Photosynthesis crashed, food webs collapsed, and about 3/4 of Earth's species disappeared.